The fluorescent lights hummed their sterile song as Nurse Maya Rodriguez pressed her bloodied hands against the fallen doctor's chest wound, her promise echoing in the chaos around her. "I'll finish what we started." 3 months earlier, she'd been just another overworked nurse drowning in student debt. Now she stood at the center of the largest healthcare fraud case in state history, and the battle had nearly cost them everything. The pneumatic doors of Riverside Medical Center opened at precisely 5:47 a.m., the same time they had for the past 2 years. Maya Rodriguez moved through the familiar corridors with practiced ease, her St. Christopher medallion catching the early light. At 26, she'd already learned that healing happened in the quiet moments between dramatic interventions, a gentle touch, a listening ear, the simple act of seeing patients as human beings rather than billing codes. The ICU was her world. She'd expected to hate it when she first started, taking the position only because it paid slightly more than other floors. Instead, she'd found her calling among the ventilators and monitors, where life balanced on the edge of a blade and every decision mattered. "Morning, mija," came a whisper from Mrs. Alvarez, 89 years old and fighting her 3rd surgery in 6 months. The elderly woman had survived a lifetime of hardship, immigrating with nothing but hope, raising children alone, and now her body was finally surrendering to time. Maya checked the monitors with efficient care. "How are we feeling today?" "Better now that you're here. You have the gift." The gift. Maya had heard this her whole life from her grandmother, who insisted some people were born with healing hands. Maya preferred concrete medical science, but there were moments, like when she'd caught Mr. Patterson's diabetic crisis 3 hours before his scheduled lab draw, or noticed the subtle breathing change that revealed Mrs. Kim's pulmonary embolism, when she wondered if intuition played a larger role than she'd admitted. Room 320 housed her most challenging patient. Tyler Mitchell, 16 years old, honor student and wrestling captain, until a drunk driver shattered his spine and his future. The impact had left him paralyzed, facing a life utterly different from the one he'd planned. "Hey, stranger," Maya said, entering his room. Tyler stared at the ceiling with the 1,000-yard look of someone trapped in forced stillness. "Hey, your dad coming by today?" Tyler's father, James Mitchell, worked security and visited when he could, but bills didn't stop for hospitalization. "He's got a job in Aurora. He'll be here for dinner." Maya settled into the chair beside his bed, pulling out a worn paperback. "Want me to read more?" For the first time that morning, Tyler's face showed interest. "You don't have to." Never too busy for a good story. She'd been reading to him for weeks, doing character voices that made him smile in a place where smiles were precious currency. As she read, Maya didn't notice her phone buzzing with another overdue loan notice. The $847 monthly payment exceeded her rent, a mathematical burden that grew despite her payments. But here, lost in the story and Tyler's quiet laughter, the debt felt distant. Everything changed 6 months after Riverside Medical Center was acquired by Summit Healthcare Corporation. The announcement came during a mandatory staff meeting. Thomas Blackwell, Summit's CEO, stood at the podium in his tailored suit, projecting the confidence of someone whose decisions were never questioned. Beside him stood Dr. Victoria Hayes, the new Chief Medical Officer, her expression carefully neutral. "We're implementing a new staffing model," Blackwell announced, "with an emphasis on efficiency and cost control. This includes a 15% reduction in full-time positions and standardization of care protocols to align with Summit best practices." Maya felt cold dread settling in her stomach. In corporate speak, efficiency rarely benefited the people actually providing care. "Additionally, we'll phase out legacy programs that don't align with our strategic vision, including the Community Outreach Clinic." Dr. Robert Davidson stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. At 68, he was a legend at Riverside, a former Army medic who'd served in Korea and spent 3 decades saving lives. Those programs serve the most vulnerable people in this community. Blackwell's smile never reached his eyes. Healthcare is a business that must be sustainable. Healthcare isn't a business, Dr. Davidson countered. It's a sacred trust. The room went still. No one spoke to Thomas Blackwell that way. Actually, Dr. Davidson, I'm glad you've raised this publicly, Blackwell said smoothly. As part of our restructuring, we've determined that your position will be eliminated through our early retirement program. The collective gasp was audible. Dr. Davidson was Riverside Medical Center. He'd trained half the doctors in the building. I'm not ready to retire, Dr. Davidson said quietly. I'm afraid it's not a request. Your retirement will be effective at the end of this month. Maya watched Dr. Davidson's face, saw the controlled response of a man who'd learned through decades to manage rage in service of something greater. You'll have my decision by week's end. Then he walked out, back straight, stride purposeful, a soldier retreating in good order rather than surrendering. The changes came swiftly. Maya's patient load increased from 6 to 8, stretching her dangerously thin. The careful monitoring, the time spent explaining procedures to frightened families, all sacrificed on the altar of efficiency. But it was the changes she couldn't see that troubled her most. Unnecessary tests, questionable medications, subtle pressure to move patients through the system faster, regardless of their condition. 3 weeks after the announcement, Maya noticed something alarming. Tyler Mitchell had been prescribed high-dose steroids with no documented inflammatory condition. The prescribing physician was Dr. Hayes. Maya found Dr. Davidson in the hospital chapel, one of the few places private conversations remained private. You shouldn't be here, she said. If Blackwell finds out you've been accessing records, then he'll have to explain why a 16-year-old with a spinal cord injury is receiving immunosuppressive doses of prednisone, Dr. Davidson interrupted, or why an 89-year-old woman with kidney disease is being prepped for a procedure that could push her into complete renal failure. Maya showed him her own notes, pages of documentation she'd been gathering. I've seen the same pattern. Aggressive interventions, questionable medications, all generating maximum reimbursement. Dr. Davidson's expression darkened. It's already happening. The slow corruption of care, one unnecessary test at a time. What can we do? Document everything. Build a case they can't ignore. Then we take it to the state medical board. It was dangerous territory. Whistleblowers rarely emerged unscathed. But Maya thought about Tyler, about Mrs. Alvarez, about all the patients who deserved better. I'll help, she said. Dr. Davidson studied her face. This won't be easy. They'll come after your license, your reputation. What's the alternative? Watch them dismantle everything that makes this place worth working in? The crisis accelerated 2 weeks later when Tyler suffered an apparent anaphylactic reaction. Maya had been reviewing records when the code blue sounded. She ran to his room to find Dr. Hayes directing resuscitation efforts. What happened? Maya demanded. Apparent anaphylactic reaction, Dr. Hayes replied without looking up. Dr. Davidson appeared suddenly, his unauthorized presence shocking everyone. What medications has he received? Dr. Hayes finally noticed him. Dr. Davidson, you're not authorized to be here. Security will escort you out. Answer the question. What was the indication for amphotericin in a 16-year-old trauma patient with no documented fungal infection? We noted suspicious infiltrates on his morning chest x-ray. Bullshit, Dr. Davidson said flatly. I reviewed his films last night. His lungs were clear. Tyler's rhythm stabilized, but the damage was done. Maya was immediately reassigned, removed from his care. Security escorted Dr. Davidson from the building. The next morning, Maya was called to Human Resources. Thomas Blackwell himself sat behind the desk. "Nurse Rodriguez, you've been observed violating multiple hospital policies, including sharing confidential patient information with unauthorized individuals." "I've advocated for my patients as I'm ethically required to do." Blackwell's smile never wavered. "Given the seriousness of these violations, we're terminating your employment, effective immediately." The words hung in the air. 2 years of dedication, countless extra shifts, all erased. Her nursing license was now under investigation. Her financial situation, already precarious, became catastrophic. But as Maya was escorted from the building, she thought not of her own situation, but of Tyler, of Mrs. Alvarez, of all the patients still under Summit's care. She pulled out her phone and called Dr. Davidson. "They fired me." "I know, James Mitchell just called. He's pulled Tyler out against medical advice. They're transferring him to University Hospital." "What's our next move?" "Meet me at O'Malley's, 1 hour. And Maya, this was always going to get worse before it got better." At the pub, Dr. Davidson wasn't alone. James Mitchell sat across from him, his weathered face set in lines of barely contained fury. Beside them was a third man Maya didn't recognize. "Maya, this is Richard Callahan, former FBI financial crimes specialist, current forensic accountant." Callahan offered his hand. "Roberts told me about your situation. Impressive moral courage, not impressive enough to keep my job." "Jobs come and go," James said gruffly. "Integrity is forever. They nearly killed my son today. As far as I'm concerned, you're a hero." "What you've documented establishes a pattern," Callahan explained. "What we need now is financial connection, proof these decisions are driven by profit." "We need a whistleblower," Dr. Davidson said. "Someone inside with access to billing records, executive communications." Maya thought about the staff she knew. Most were terrified of becoming the next one fired. Then an idea formed. Melissa Patel in HR. "She looked uncomfortable during my termination, like she knew something wasn't right." The next day, Maya met Melissa at a quiet coffee shop. The HR director arrived precisely on time, her expression guarded. "What exactly are your concerns?" Melissa asked after ordering coffee. Maya slid a thin folder across the table. "I believe Summit has systematically prioritized profit over patient welfare." Melissa scanned the contents, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Even if these clinical concerns are valid, what makes you believe they're financially motivated?" "The pattern is too consistent, and it all accelerated after the acquisition." Melissa studied Maya for a long moment. Then she reached into her purse and withdrew a small USB drive, sliding it across with casual grace. "A colleague asked me to transfer some files when our network went down. I did, and forgot to delete them afterward. An oversight." Maya understood immediately. Plausible deniability. "Technology can be complicated," Maya agreed, pocketing the drive. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Melissa said quietly, "for all our sakes." The USB drive contained everything they needed. Internal emails between Blackwell and Summit's corporate leadership detailed enhanced revenue protocols and optimization of medication regimens, detailed breakdowns of which procedures generated the highest reimbursement rates, quotas for physicians, a tracking system for those who failed to meet revenue targets. "There's a whole section on managing potential legal exposure," Callahan said, scanning through files. They knew these practices were questionable. They have contingency plans for regulatory scrutiny, PR strategies for negative outcomes, even a fund set aside for confidential settlements. "They planned for patients dying," Maya whispered. Dr. Davidson stood at the window, his voice heavy. "This was never just about Riverside." "The emails make that clear. We're the test case. If these practices succeed here, they'll implement them across all Summit facilities nationwide." Callahan closed his laptop. We take it to the Attorney General. Today. The meeting at the Attorney General's office lasted 2 hours. Sarah Chen, senior prosecutor in the Healthcare Fraud Division, listened intently as they presented their case. When they finished, she closed her notebook with deliberate care. If even half of what you've presented is accurate, this represents one of the most significant healthcare fraud cases this office has seen. The documentary evidence combined with first-hand testimony is compelling. What happens next? Dr. Davidson asked. We need to move carefully. Before we can take formal action, we need to verify authenticity, interview witnesses, build an airtight case. While you're building your case, patients are still at risk, James protested. There are immediate steps we can take. The medical board can review specific cases, the insurance commissioner can audit billing practices, and my office can issue preservation orders. It wasn't the immediate action they'd hoped for, but it was something. That evening, as they discussed next steps, Dr. Davidson voiced what they were all thinking. It's not enough. Not fast enough. We need to do more while the official investigation proceeds. Public attention, Maya said. If patients and families knew what was happening, they'd demand immediate changes. James nodded. The press. No hospital can function without public trust. Summit has a substantial PR department, Dr. Davidson cautioned. They'll spin any accusations. Not if we have irrefutable evidence, Maya countered. They spent the evening preparing documents for strategic release to the press. Callahan selected the most damning evidence from the USB drive. Dr. Davidson wrote detailed explanations of how Summit's protocols endangered patients. James contributed a powerful personal statement about Tyler's experience. The next morning, Maya woke to a call from James, his voice tight with urgency. Maya, something's happening at Riverside. Code Silver. Active shooter. Maya's blood ran cold. She grabbed her keys and rushed to her car, making the drive in record time. The scene at the hospital was chaos. Police cars blocked the main entrance. Ambulances stood ready. She spotted Dr. Davidson arguing with an officer. What's happening? She asked, reaching his side. Armed individual in the main lobby. Reports of shots fired. At least one wounded security guard. Who is it? Rumors saying it's James Reeves. Former lab tech fired 6 months ago for drug use. He made threats at the time, but the hospital reduced security anyway. Maya remembered the discussions, the warnings dismissed as excessive caution. We need to get inside, she said. If power is compromised, ICU patients are at risk. They circled the building, finding a maintenance tunnel with an access code Dr. Davidson still remembered. Moving through the dimly lit passage, they emerged in the mechanical room. Generator controls, Dr. Davidson said, checking a wall panel. We need to ensure backup systems are ready. They moved cautiously through empty corridors toward the ICU. As they approached, they heard voices, staff debating whether to check generator controls or follow lockdown protocol. Dr. Davidson pushed open the stairwell door. 3 figures turned, startled. Dr. Williams, Dr. Hayes, and a young nurse. Davidson, Hayes recovered first, anger replacing surprise. What are you doing here? You're trespassing. We heard about the situation. Came to help with critical patients. You're calling security immediately. Good luck with that, Maya said. Security's dealing with an armed individual. I think they have higher priorities. Dr. Williams stepped forward, relief evident. Thank God you're here. We've been debating generator controls. Protocol says stay locked down, but if power fails, patients die, Dr. Davidson finished. Protocol be damned. Before Hayes could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the corridors. Gunfire, closer than before. I'll check the generator controls, Dr. Davidson said. Maya, get to the ICU. I'm going with you. They moved cautiously into the main corridor. The generator panel was 30 yards away. As they approached, heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. A man walked slowly toward them, rifle held casually at his side. James Reeves, former lab technician, now armed and dangerous. "There," Dr. Davidson whispered, pointing to a supply closet. They slipped inside just as Reeves rounded the corner. Through a gap in the door, they watched him pause at the ICU entrance, raising his rifle toward the patients visible within. Maya understood with perfect clarity what she had to do. Without time for debate or consideration of consequences, she stepped out of the closet, positioning herself between Reeves and the ICU doors. "James," she said steadily, "put the gun down." Reeves turned, startled. Recognition dawned. "The ICU nurse. You got fired like me. I came back because people need help, just like you need help. This isn't the way. They destroyed my life. Fired me for using once. Made sure I couldn't work anywhere else." Maya took a small step forward. "That's wrong. But these people in the ICU didn't make that decision. They're patients who need care. Blackwell made the decision. Hayes supported it. They're hiding somewhere. Then this isn't the place to look." Maya took another step forward, fully exposed now. "Let these patients be." For a moment, it seemed to work. Reeves's expression softened, the rifle lowering slightly. But then a noise from within the ICU refocused his attention. Maya stepped directly into his line of fire. "If you want to shoot in there, you'll have to shoot me first." Time seemed to slow. Behind her, through the reinforced glass, she could see nurses moving patients away from the doors. "Move," Reeves said, his voice strained. "I don't want to hurt you." "I can't do that. These are my patients, my colleagues." Sudden movement at the corridor's far end shattered the equilibrium. Dr. Davidson emerged from the supply closet, hands raised. "James Reeves," he called, authority in his voice. "This isn't who you are. You were a valuable member of our team. Whatever they did to you, this won't make it right." Reeves swung the rifle toward this new threat. "Dr. Davidson, they fired you too." "They did. But this isn't the answer. These people behind these doors, they're innocent. They're just trying to survive." Dr. Davidson moved slowly down the corridor as he spoke, drawing Reeves's attention away from the ICU, creating distance between the gunman and vulnerable patients. Then, from the administrative wing, came a new voice, sharp and authoritative. "Drop the weapon immediately." A security officer had entered the far end of the corridor, his own weapon drawn. The sudden escalation shattered the moment of potential surrender. Reeves raised his rifle. The security officer fired. Reeves returned fire. Dr. Davidson lunged forward. Then silence, broken only by the soft thud of bodies hitting the floor. Maya moved without conscious thought, running toward the fallen figures. The security officer was down with a shoulder wound. Reeves lay motionless, and Dr. Davidson was fighting for his own life, blood pooling beneath him from a wound that had caught him in the crossfire. Maya knelt beside him, pressing her hands to the chest wound, knowing even as she did that it might not be enough. "Maya," Dr. Davidson whispered, his voice weak but steady. "Get to the ICU. Patients need you. They have other nurses. You need me now." His hand found hers, grip surprisingly strong. "Always the advocate. Knew you were special from day one." Medical staff surrounded them, taking over his care. A SWAT officer guided Maya gently away. The next hours passed in a blur. Reeves was pronounced dead. The security officer stabilized, and Robert Davidson was rushed to surgery, his condition critical but stable. Maya found herself in a waiting room, surrounded by familiar faces. James Mitchell had arrived. Callahan was making calls, coordinating with the Attorney General's office. And Melissa Patel had come, having heard the news. "I've resigned from Summit," Melissa told Maya quietly. "Effective immediately, and I've agreed to testify about everything. This madness has to stop." A surgeon appeared, still in operating scrubs. "Dr. Davidson is out of surgery. The bullet missed his heart, but damaged his lung. Recovery will be long, but barring complications, he should make a full recovery. The relief was palpable. As the day faded into evening, Maya stood at the window of Dr. Davidson's recovery room, watching the mountains catch the last light. "We'll finish what we started," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear through the sedation. "We'll make sure Summit answers for everything." 3 months later, Maya stood at the back of a crowded courtroom as Thomas Blackwell and Victoria Hayes were led away in handcuffs. The Attorney General's investigation had moved with unprecedented speed, fueled by public outrage and a steady stream of whistleblowers. The charges were extensive: healthcare fraud, conspiracy, reckless endangerment, obstruction of justice. In Blackwell's case, involuntary manslaughter. Maya's nursing license had been fully restored with a formal apology. Dr. Davidson's recovery had been slow but steady. He was now consulting on a state commission to draft new regulations protecting healthcare whistleblowers. Maya had found new purpose. University Hospital offered her a position as director of a new patient advocacy program designed to ensure care decisions remained focused on outcomes rather than billing. Tyler was making remarkable progress. The experimental treatments University Hospital approved, treatments Summit had deemed not cost-effective, were showing promising results. He had regained significant function and was now walking short distances with specialized braces. His goal was to walk across the stage at graduation. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around the small group who had brought the Summit case to light. James Mitchell had become their unofficial spokesperson. "Today is just the beginning," he told the press. "The real victory will come when we transform our healthcare system back into what it was meant to be, a sacred trust between healers and those who need healing, not a business, a calling." Maya slipped away from the crowd, making her way to where Dr. Davidson waited in a courtyard cafe. He looked better than he had in weeks, color returning to his face. "Did they ask about your next move?" he asked as she sat down. Maya smiled. "Always. But I told them the truth, that I'm going back to work tomorrow, that my patients need me, that the real work of fixing healthcare happens one person at a time." Dr. Davidson nodded, satisfaction evident. "That's my girl." They sat in companionable silence, watching life flow around them, people hurrying to appointments, couples walking hand in hand, a mother comforting a crying child, the ordinary moments that made up a life. "You know," Dr. Davidson said finally, "when I was in Korea, I had a commanding officer who told me something I never forgot. He said medicine isn't just about applying scientific knowledge. It's about standing in the gap between suffering and healing, standing firm no matter what." "Sounds like someone I know," Maya replied. As they walked back toward the parking garage, Maya felt a sense of completion. The battle wasn't over. Institutional change never happened quickly or easily, but something had shifted. A line had been drawn, a standard raised. Maya Rodriguez, who had once been just an ordinary nurse worried about student loans and overtime pay, had found her true calling, standing in the gap, holding the line, protecting the sacred trust between those who heal and those who need healing. Outside, the mountains stood eternal against the horizon, witnesses to human triumph and failure alike. The winds of change were blowing, and for the first time in too long, they carried not the scent of profit but of hope.